Hey there, and welcome to the Dynamics Hot Dish Podcast, serving up stories and knowledge on Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. This is what's hot in Dynamics. You're now joining Merlin Schweiger, Liz McGlennon, and Ashley Steiner.
Such a missed opportunity.
I'm already wearing my costume. This is my costume.
Your
I
face?
look like me.
Your face is
Ooh.
a costume.
Wow. Yes, so speaking of Halloween costumes, I generally dress as myself, which is a t-shirt, probably jeans, and because it's cold out, usually a jacket. And that's usually my costume.
It's not a costume.
That's boring.
Everyday wear.
Yeah, I dress up like myself, which sometimes I put my wizard hat on. Like, that's a good sort of like immediate costume. Just put the hat on. There, now I'm a wizard.
I honestly never thought Merlin would be the most not fun, boring person out of the three of us. I thought I would have been for sure. Because I don't dress up all that often, but like I don't say if I don't dress up, I'm not like, oh, I'm just myself. I just say I'm too lazy to come up with a costume.
Yeah, and I bet you dress up some years, Ashley. Like I bet you're just like hardcore, like I never have a costume for Halloween.
No, I'm not like that. I usually dress up something with Harry Potter is probably like my go-to. I've got like the robes, I have ties, I have the sweaters, I have everything. So like if I go out, I used to be Dorothy a lot. I really liked the red shoes part of Dorothy. So I used to be Dorothy and carry around like a stuffed dog. That was like my go-to. But now it's just Harry Potter. It's easy and I enjoy it. So
and Panther has a costume, so that counts too.
Well, this year he has a costume. I don't torture him with costumes every year. I'll have to post in our like notes or something a picture of Panther's costume.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like
I actually can't think of the last time that I put on like a real true costume as like an adult human. It's always sort of like some lazy like half.
Did you have some sort of trauma?
Wait, time out.
Like,
are we just saying for Halloween or like in general?
Yeah. No, it's just for Halloween.
So you wear costumes for other things throughout the year.
What else am I going to wear a costume for throughout the year that's not
Halloween? Cosplay conferences, the Renaissance Festival, costume parties.
I don't get invited to parties, which won't surprise Ashley. I don't dress up to go to Renfest. I've never been to a Comic-Con or similar
a movie showing, like if there's Star Wars coming out or like Marvel, like dressing up.
No, I guess I guess categorically, no, I don't put on costumes. I haven't put on a costume that I don't even know how long. But when I was a kid, like I had this bat costume. It was pretty sweet. I had like wings, I had like little pointy ears. I looked great, but I was like 6.
Can we see a picture? Did they have pictures back then when you were 6? Can we see a picture of that?
I think
black
so.
And white.
Let me see if
black and white.
Let me see if I can archive the. I mean,
it wasn't. You didn't have to stand for an oil painting.
Wow, Liz, how about your Halloween plans?
I have 2 costumes because I have 2 different events. So the first one is Jeremy's annual Halloween party, which is a big production. And it's the weekend before Halloween, and their theme this year is pirates. It's a different theme each year. So we're going as a group costume, and I'm going to be Tinkerbell, and we're going to do Peter Pan.
Oh, I like it. That's cute.
Yes, and Tom's being the crocodile, and then we have a Captain Hook and a Wendy and hopefully a Peter Pan.
So, Peter Pan theme, but nobody's going to be Peter Pan.
Sounds like Merlin is available. Merlin doesn't do a lot of...
Merlin, have you ever gone to Jeremy's Halloween party?
No, I never have.
It's pretty fun.
So I've heard.
It's COVID safe, all outside, mask required. So
nice.
Pretty safe. Yeah. And then for actual Halloween, we do something really over the top. So we build like a haunted trail in our backyard. And we have, I don't know, we don't ever count, but we just know how much candy we have. So we typically buy like 120 to 150 full-size candy bars, and they run out. So we have like 150 plus trick-or-treaters plus all the adults and teenagers come through. and cool. We have a bunch of scares, and yeah, it's pretty elaborate. It's like a McGlennon family tradition. They've been doing it for like 10 years. And so now it's at our house and we run it. And we have a theme this year, which is the circus theme. And it's the first year we've themed it. And so I'm going to be a ringmaster. And I have this cool jacket and dress, but then I'm going to do like lizard scales on half of my face.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought I had a cool Halloween tradition that's only been 1 year, because I've only been in my house for 1 year, is I hand out shots of Fireball to all the adults that come by.
That is awesome. We usually have Fireball out to go with the hot cider. So like we started putting out like hot beverages, which people like, but
that's a good idea. Yeah. This year I think I'm going to do Jello shots and like just beer but also I think the Fireball is a great option. So yeah, I'm just gonna have like a little bar outside for people, for the adults.
Fireball is better if it's cold out, but
right.
Yeah.
So the kids get something and then the adults have some fun.
So if anyone's in Minneapolis and wants to come by or wants to help with it, let me know. We do it every year.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's a fun, I made it a fundraiser too, because we had so many people coming through. So we're gonna donate the donations to Secondhand Hounds, which is a pet rescue this year.
I love that. Doesn't she just make you feel awful about yourself? Because I'm talking here about like getting drunk with the people in my neighborhood and Merlin dresses as himself.
I mean, yeah, right. I feel like clearly this is a different level of investment in the Halloween holiday. I do not invest that heavily in Halloween.
I have to say, I was proud of myself for getting like one of those blow up things for Halloween this year. I thought that was a big deal.
We have so much big stuff. It's ridiculous. It's not even all us. Like Tom's siblings and his dad are like super into it. So like a lot of it is like them helping. Yeah. I mean, it's a ton of work too. Like Tom takes off like 3 days of work to like prep for it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a commitment to anything.
I feel good if we actually carved our pumpkins and put them in the front of the house.
Oh, we do that too.
But like what Merlin's saying is that if they actually get to it.
Yeah. That's the end. That's the final
pumpkins
result.
Are very elaborate too. I'll have to send you a picture of Tom's pumpkins. Like he spends like 6 hours carving a pumpkin. It's like
I can't remember last time I carved a pumpkin.
He does like shadowing where I just cut holes, but he actually like shaves away layers to give it like dimension. It's nuts.
I mean, I can appreciate the artistry. I just don't have the patience to do it myself.
We're way too into Halloween around here. It's probably like the favorite holiday.
I'm not into anything that much. Like I'm impressed. I'm thoroughly impressed. Like
I'll send you guys pictures.
You do.
Yeah.
Sounds like I need to visit on Halloween 1 year.
You do. Yeah, except it's a Sunday this year. So like it's a work night. So maybe wait for it to be a weekend again. I did ask Tom, I'm like, what are we going to do if we ever have kids? Like someone's going to have to take the kids trick-or-treating. And he's like, nah, like they can go to the few houses like really close by and then they have to help with the haunted house. I'm like, that is so mean.
That'll be super fun for them.
Yeah, because I'm
when they dress up like themselves.
Well,
when the kids dress up like themselves because of Uncle Merlin, I mean, they probably won't care.
Well, you just incorporate them into the haunted house by chaining them to the wall, and they'll look like torture prisoners. And they'll be like, "Help! Help!" Very convincing.
This turned
more realistic.
Anyway, perhaps we should talk about our topic of the day, which is training. Everybody's favorite topic.
I think legitimately might be one of my favorite topics.
So Merlin always starts out with that, like, oh, it's our favorite topic, like so sarcastically, but this one today, I think we all are pretty excited about.
Yes. I think that's actually true. And my sort of caveat, the reason that I started sounding like I was being sarcastic is because I feel like from the consultant perspective, when you're selling to somebody, training is usually one of the first things that they want to cut back on because it is viewed as like an extravagance or an extra expense. Like, I just need the system. Like, I'll figure out how to train users.
Or they'll just figure it out.
And sometimes like that can be really difficult to fight back against. And I feel very strongly that that's a terrible plan.
I agree.
Because you're right. Training is very important.
Yeah, it's not the like build the system and the people will come or you'll have good user adoption. Like, yeah, you can build the system, but if you don't think of and spend time and resources on the training and the change management, it is likely to fail.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And even if they figure out
no, go ahead, Merlin.
I would say, even if they like figure out the technology, like
Right.
I've encountered this even just myself in our own internal CRM, like somebody else was making some changes to build out a new process. And then I got in there and looked at it and I was like, well, I don't know how this thing works. And so I'm just like clicking around. I'm like, oh, why did it do that? What's it supposed to do here? And I'm already confused. Obviously, I'm not confused because I don't know how to use it, but I don't know how to use it.
What's the process? What's the expectations of what's been built? And how does it, apply to like your business process? Yeah.
And I think the training is how you build the what's in it for the end user, right? Like, what's the purpose? Why use this tool? How is it going to help you? And so if you just give them a tool, they're going to look at it as one additional thing that they have to do as part of their day. It's an add-on. It's not something that can be worked in. So I think that training really helps that process of like, this is how you integrate it into your workday rather than it being an add-on extra thing.
I agree. Actually, I think that brings up a really good point too, of like, it needs to be quality training. Like, not all training is not equal. And like, you can do training, but if it's not effective, it doesn't count,
Right.
So can we dig into that a little bit? What are some good ways to do more effective training? And I guess I want to caveat that with different people learn in different ways. Some people like to be more hands-on. Some people like to have a lecture. How do you deliver good training?
So, I mean, at first, like, we're talking about training on software. And so like, we're talking about that type of content, which I think helps narrow down the window of like the forms of delivery or like the methods. You're not going to probably do as many like self-reflections or like group discussions if you're trying to teach someone a software system, where those might be super applicable for a different subject matter. But I mean, I think thinking about your audience first, and if you know their learning preferences, tailoring the approach to that, but assuming that you either don't know that or it's a super diverse group, I mean, trying to accommodate or provide resources in all formats is helpful. So, talking about things, lecture, demonstrating how to do it, giving them hands-on time. Like, I'm a big fan of the like tell, show, do approach for software training, but like also providing other visuals, other resources, other assets that may be reminders or resources for after the training. I think you just want to try to think of all the different preferences or all the different approaches and try to cover all of your bases. I think the most common thing that I see done is like, you just give them a PDF or you just lecture them. And if you're just doing those one or both of those things, like, it's probably not going to be super effective because there's no interaction there and there's no hands-on kind of portion to that type of training.
Mm-hmm.
I think Liz just covered everything that I could have possibly added to that. I think the only other thing I'll say is like, I think you need to scale your training depending on what is coming out. So like, if you're doing an implementation, that might require more hands-on in a room, get everybody together. That might also include some discussion. Mm-hmm. But like, I think about the releases that I do now that were implemented, like, it's small things. Every month we add a few things that are small. And so I might not reach out and have like any sort of virtual or in-person training with folks because it's better use of their time to like send out the video and hold them accountable to watching that, or sending documentation. So I think that it needs to also be scalable depending on what you're doing. Bringing everyone together might not be a good use of their time if it's like adding a field to a form.
Yeah, or like the type of content that you're covering. Like, if you're covering like basic navigation, like maybe self-paced material is fine for that. But if you're covering like with a sales team and rolling out a new sales process, and there's a lot of like kind of business process baked in, or if there's going to be any sort of like resistance, like then maybe you want live virtual or live in person. So again, it's actually to your point, it's like what's being deployed, like what is the functionality or like the scale of the change, and then who are you deploying, like who is your audience, and factoring that all into like planning your training and thinking through that before you start like designing or building out the training content. So there's this model, my undergrads in human resource development. So like I had a lot of formal training on how to be a trainer. So the ADDIE model is analyze, design, develop, implement, evaluate. So like the analyze and the design is the upfront work of like knowing your audience, like identifying your learning objectives, and then designing out, like planning out your training based on that. And so often like that is skipped, or you kind of rush through that and you just start like building your training without thinking about those things first.
It's a good call.
Is that model like a competitor to ADCAR, or is that an add-on?
ADCAR is more about change management.
Okay.
So I'm strictly just talking training.
Fair enough.
Yeah. What training factors into change management is one component, but change management is like a lot more than just training.
True. All right, fair enough. I've done some training in the recent past where I tried to take a slightly different approach than kind of the classic software training that I'd seen like Microsoft delivers. So for anybody who's gone through like the app in a day or any of the in a day sorts of trainings, I guess it kind of follows that tell, sort of show, and then like do process where they spend 40 to 45 minutes going through slides, and then they kind of say, and here's what we're going to do, and here's the lab, and then just go do the lab. And then you've got like 45 minutes of silence while everybody is sitting there like typing away on their computer trying to figure it out. And I always felt like that bugged me, because I would go through the lab by literally following all of the steps in the document, and I get to the end and I had the result that I was supposed to get and be like, cool. But I have no idea why I did any of these things. I don't understand what the point was of doing any of these things. And if you asked me to do something that was similar but slightly different, I would probably struggle to do it. So I felt like that training only trained me to do exactly the lab-based scenario that they had handed me, and not actually anything about the underlying technology.
Yeah, it didn't actually like prep you to go like build what you actually need to build using that tool, like that software. Yeah.
Right. So I tried to take a different training approach, and you guys can tell me if this sounds terrible or slightly improved or marginally better. I don't know. Where when I was doing the training, I tried to instead, like in real time, like let's walk through the lab, all of us together. So instead of spending a bunch of time on like presentation, like I did some presentation, but then like, okay, here's what we're going to build. Here's why we're going to build it. And now like everybody open up the screen and like follow along. And then I can sort of answer questions in real time. I can talk about why I'm doing this versus doing something else. And I feel like at the time that was better received by the students, but I also haven't gone through that myself as a participant, so I'm not sure.
I can see the benefit of that. I mean, I think also if someone's wondering something or get stuck in the process, like you would be able to help immediately. Mm-hmm. I think the challenge of that would be that people typically go at different paces. So like, how do you know you're not going too fast, or are you going as slow as the slowest person? And then it's super boring for the person that's more advanced. And so like that pacing part, when you're building it together, what did you do for that?
I mean, obviously I ended up going at the speed of the slowest person.
Do you think it was too slow, or was it fine?
I guess nobody complained. I feel like the fast people, I feel like, no, I know.
Did you do a survey at the end to ask?
I did do a survey, and I got reasonably high marks on the survey, but I guess I felt like the people who got it right away were then like tinkering, like digging around while they were waiting for us to move on to the next step. So, you know, I was only adding this thing to my Canvas app and then making this modification to it. And while I was helping, you know, the slowest person walk through that, my presumption is that the people who had no problem with that were like, oh, well, what does this one do? What does this one do? What does this one do? And sort of like, I don't know, a little bit of self-paced exploration on their own.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Because I think that the hardest part about training, especially like the app in a day that you were talking about, is that it doesn't help you build critical thinking skills while you're building this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that I hate to admit it, I thought everybody just innately had. But it is a skill that you can like learn over time, and like you have to apply it. And so when you're going, you have to practice, right? So, and that's why I think math is really important in school, because that helps you with critical thinking anyways. So, but to your point, Merlin, like, so as you're like walking through it, they could say, oh, I have this real life example and we're taking this step. So these are the steps that I could take over here. And to your point, like if they're going quicker, or even if they're slower, it means they're methodically thinking it through, and they're not like, oh, I'm going to hurry up and pretend I'm done because everyone else is.
Mm-hmm. I think that your approach, Merlin, works better with a smaller group too. Like, I think it'd be really hard to do that if you had like more than 20 people, let's say.
Yeah, no, I was limiting myself to 15 at most. So
I will also just add, I know you used the in a day kind of lab example. I think those, I don't care if people listen to this, like, I think those labs are really poorly written in general, and that some labs might be better written, but I agree. Like, I think doing a lab in isolation doesn't give you the context or just the full picture, or like enable you to like, critical think or ask questions along the way.
Well, and I think this is, so we've kind of switched from like end user to like admin training, which are, I think, two very different things.
But you could do labs for end users too.
You can. Yeah. No, I agree. The concepts are the same.
Yeah.
But that's where I struggle, I would say, when I'm getting maybe a new person onto the Dynamics team, and maybe they haven't worked with like Dynamics, but they've worked with other technologies, so they're familiar, is I'm always like, well, here's how in our little bubble we use this system so that you can like then, do what we need you to do, but in our little bubble. But then if we branch out, they're like, well, I don't get why this touches here or how this connects, because they've only learned like this small little piece of what I had time to show them. Like, okay, you're going to create this and it touches to that, but they don't understand like on the back end that there's all these relationships, things relate to each other, like you can add things on. And so I've found that not teaching them just like the basics or going back to the beginning of the purpose is kind of painful. So definitely something I've learned over time.
Could see that.
Yeah, and I think that is an overlap between administrator and end user training, is the purpose, right? Mm-hmm. Like you said at the very beginning, it ties back to like, what's in it for me? Like, why are we doing this? Why does this matter? And I think from an administrator perspective, it's important to know, why did we build the system this way? What are the goals that we have out of the application as a whole? And then that carries over to the users for like, why did we put in a new sales CRM or a new customer service system? What are the goals that we're trying to accomplish here? Like, why are we going through all of this, and how is this going to impact and help and change your day-to-day, as sort of that context? And that's, I realize, again, that's more change management than training. But I feel like if you try to just do training without some of that change management and some of that context, it's just like, it's like bad math education, to use your critical thinking example, Ashley. Like, I can teach you to memorize the multiplication tables, but that's not going to help you understand the concept of how multiplication works as a concept. And you're going to be far more successful if you know how it works as a concept, because if you've only just memorized the table, the first time you get a number that's not on the table, you're lost. You have no idea what to do.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I think if people don't know the why or the context or the reason to, like, they're way more likely just to like tune out and just stop. Like, it's just like, why does this apply to me? Why should I care about this?
Right.
Yeah. And just you lose them almost before you even start the training potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
Go ahead, Liz. No,
I want to hear what you have to say.
I was going to say, I always think of training in like the rules of 10. So like 2 people are going to love it, pick it up automatically. 2 people are going to hate it regardless of what you do. So you have these 6 people in the middle that you can sway one way or the other. So I always build my training for like, to convince those 6 people that like, they want to move this. And that's how I build my trainings, at least, is I'm not going to talk to there's going to be 2 people that use it regardless. They're going to figure it out. They're going to do it. And then I'm not trying to convince the people that never will, because that's a waste of my time. So how can I convince, or how can I work with those 6 people and build my training to get them on board?
like that.
Liz, you can go now.
Yeah, mine were more like logistics of like facilitating trainings. Like you have to give people breaks. Like I've had this debate with people before, and it's like, no, people need breaks, whether you're virtual or in person. Another tool is like up the parking lot. So if someone asks a question that's gonna like really bring you off topic and like down a big tangent, like you still acknowledge it, you write it down, and you can have like a side conversation or like follow up on that. But that's a good way to like stay on agenda. And assume like quick questions I always think are fine, but if it's like a bigger, really off topic thing, those are just kind of 2 tips I have for like facilitation, and obviously making it as interactive as possible, whether it's virtual or in person. Like most people don't want to be lectured to. So like Merlin, I think you're like, let's build this together is a great way to make it interactive, but depending on what the topic is, there's obviously other ways to do that too.
The parking lot is probably my favorite thing to introduce into training, because people always try to go down a rabbit hole in training, and so you can just really get them back on track. But another one, Liz, that you said in there is I also think that like the amount of time that you spend training, so short breaks, but like a whole day, even with like a breaks and lunch, is really overwhelming. Or it can be, depending on your audience, right? Like if you have some real captive people, this is like their sole job. But if you're talking about like salespeople, customer service, like doing things in chunks or breaking it up, is probably better for them to retain.
Especially virtual, and especially if they're trying to like fit this in with their regular job too. Like someone is really going to struggle focusing if they have their regular work to do and they're in training for like an 8-hour day or 5 days in a row, like a full week. Like that is super fatiguing. And then just again, I think people are tempted to like multitask and like try to do their regular work at the same time. So yeah, Ashley, smaller chunks. Like what's your ideal like duration for a training?
Virtually, I try to do nothing more than 45 minutes,
is
okay. So I try, because it's hard to keep a salesperson's attention. Now I might do 45 minutes over multiple days or periods, and I break up the content, and I have it all lead together and tie together. But yeah, I know that I lose a salesperson's attention probably after 25 minutes. So 45 minutes is pushing it. I do more 15-minute every week, and I get more done, and I know that they learn more than if I scheduled a 4-hour block.
Interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense. The last one that I did was all virtual, and it was like 2 to 3 hours twice a week. Like Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. And I felt like that worked a lot better than trying to like cram it all into 1 week.
I think it depends on your audience, right? I think that if you're doing admin type training, those people are going to be a little more captive. End users, I think that they're, the way that they stay into, like engaged and stuff is going to go down the longer it is.
Well, and I feel like the end user training, like typically the concepts are less complex. So you can like complete a topic in maybe 45 minutes. Whereas if admin training, like if you're trying to build out, I don't know, a flow or like something in the Power Platform, like 45 minutes for all of it might be like too short of time.
Yeah,
so depends on your content. So the last thing I want to add in is just the E in ADDIE, so evaluations. And I think people typically do like a feedback survey on how the training was or the trainer. I think that's pretty common. Do you guys typically do that?
I just did that for a training this week.
Okay, nice. Yeah, so like I think that's common, but I think the thing that gets forgotten about or ignored because it's either too much work or whatever reason is the evaluation on whether or not the learners learned what they were supposed to. And that can be in so many different forms. Like I think the traditional form would be like a quiz or a test, but it could be like hands-on, it could just be observation, it could be any like project, like practice work, but just like tying it back to those initial objectives of like, what are we trying to teach them? And did it actually work? Like, was it effective? Because if they didn't learn it, you need to like circle back and address that.
That's a good point, because I did ask a question on there. Like what we did was like a tips and tricks on Sales Navigator, and we actually had LinkedIn come and do it. So it wasn't like a formal training, I would say. It was more of a like, here's what you could use this tool for. And so I just said, did you walk away with one thing that you could use today in your selling, is the question I asked. But I didn't quiz them on like what that one thing was. So I think that's a good way to do it.
Yeah,
And I think that probably like the next step, right? When you follow up with them is I could say, all right, cool. Show me how you're actually using this or how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that ties into the last thing that I'd add is like reinforcement over time. So like not just evaluating and making sure that they understood something immediately after the training, but like, what about 2 weeks out? What about a month out?
Mm-hmm.
What about 3 months out? Like, are they using it? Do they have any problems or questions that they don't know how to solve? The things that they didn't learn in the training.
Yeah. Did it stick?
Yeah.
Yeah. And reinforcement, like people don't retain everything the first time they hear it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think coming up with that cadence though of like what reinforcement means is different for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there should be something. Like I think that's the key is that it might be weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever, in whatever format, but like not doing any reinforcement is a bad thing.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yep. Any other final thoughts, Liz, on training items?
I mean, we haven't talked about in-person versus virtual.
Ooh.
I know.
I honestly feel like I could spend 20 minutes talking about that just on its own. That might have to be a good follow-up.
Huge shift. It could be. Yeah.
Mm.
I think virtual is harder personally.
Yeah.
To engage people.
We should save our thoughts for our follow-up on this because I have so much to say on this topic.
Okay. That works.
Right. Ashley, did you have any parting thoughts that aren't another session?
No, but that was everything.
All right, cool. Then we'll wrap it up there. Thanks everyone for listening. Thank you for listening to the Dynamics Hot Dish podcast. For additional content and previous episodes, check out our website at dynamicshotdish.com, follow us on Twitter at dynamicshotdish, and subscribe to our podcast for notifications. Thanks. See you next time.